It's time for Remodel Revolution. And now, an award-winning contractor with over 40 years' experience. Here is Alex Guthrie.
Welcome to another episode of Remodel Revolution. So glad to have you here with us today. We're coming to you deep from the heart of Texas at the Remodel Revolution World Headquarters. I'm your host, Alex Guthrie. Today is going to be a really fun show. Did you know that there was actually a definition for wood floors? I did not know that. We're going to have our first guest today is going to be John Dupra with Revel Floors. He's in New York where it's cold and blustery, and we're going to have him on in just a minute or two. And our second hour, our guest is going to be David VanWert with VanWert Technology. He's going to be in California. So John is fighting the winter and David is fighting fires. So it ought to be an interesting day. Let's go to John and get John going here, and because we've got a lot of ground to cover. And John and I visited for a little bit, and John likes to talk. He's chatty, and that's what I like about him. How you doing?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, hear you fine.
Awesome.
Hear you fine.
Hey,
how you doing?
Thank you. I'm great, Alex. Thank you for having me on and tolerating my loquaciousness.
Your loquaciousness. So, you tell us about Revel Floors, or Revel Woods, which is your company, and give us a brief overview of what your expertise is.
Sure. Yeah, happy to. So first, thanks for having me on. Super excited about this. And so Revel Woods was started a couple years ago. We were originally a part of our parent company, which is a wholesale wood flooring distribution company. And we had the idea of, look, the industry's been so old and the supply chain has run a certain way for so long that it was going to change. So rather than prepare to be disrupted, our thought process was, let's think of what this could look like in the future and create kind of a sales model that fits that. So Revel Woods was started. There was a group of us, and we got together, pulled our resources, and figured, let's see what the future of this industry could look like and create the tool that would help usher that in.
Because there's been so many changes in the building industry. There's been a lot of changes in the consumer and a lot of so much information coming to people. But the biggest thing that I've seen is the change in the manufacturing process of floors, because your flooring wood flooring in particular used to be just solid wood floors. That's, of course, I'm a little bit older than you. And so when I grew up, we didn't have engineered flooring. We just had solid wood floors. But now it's really leaning really stronger to the engineered wood flooring part of the process. So tell us, what is an engineered wood floor? What is that wood plank made of?
So that's a great question. And I might zoom back a little bit to talk about, there are technically 3 different types of wood flooring that is classified real wood floors. So originally, when you think is this a real wood floor or not, one would assume that would be self-evident. But it actually isn't. And there was a company that I won't name specifically, but a large company that started a couple of years ago selling basically a laminate product, which is not a real wood floor. It's a picture of wood with sort of some kind of composite high density fiber core underneath it, and then a coating on top. And they were calling that a real wood floor because the picture was printed on effectively paper, which is a wood byproduct. So it's a little bit like calling a hot dog filet, because there might be some filet in there.
Because it might have come out of the right end of the hog. Okay.
Right, exactly. Or raccoon or whatever.
Right.
So what that did, though, was it prompted the National Wood Flooring Association, of which my father actually is currently chairman of the board of directors, to define what real wood floor meant. And so what happened is they came up with, and it's kind of controversial, which one would think wood flooring shouldn't be. It should be like the least controversial.
Came out of a tree
in the world, but we did it. We accepted the challenge. We were going to find some controversy, and we did it. So take that, haters. We can find controversy in anything. But here's the official definition: is basically divided into 3 different categories. So the first one is what you were kind of just talking about in solid wood flooring. These names are not very creative. So solid wood flooring is every floor plank is made of a single solid piece of wood. So that's kind of what people think of when they say real originally. And I'm using air quotes because it is considered real, but it's not the only thing that's considered real. So solids have some advantages. They have some disadvantages. Particular disadvantage is because wood is hydroscopic, meaning it move water through the tree. It reacts very much with moisture. So that whole board, every plank in that floor is going to move as, one big piece as it expands and contracts with the seasons. And so as a result of that, we don't recommend wider planks in solids. We don't recommend certain substrates or subfloors or in-floor heating underneath solids because they react quite a bit more. The second category is what you were just talking about with engineered wood flooring. Engineered wood flooring is so if it's a white oak engineered, let's say, the top layer is real white oak. And then underneath that is different levels of other species of wood. They can be plywood, it can be some other different things. But they run sort of perpendicular to each other. So wood wants to expand and contract along the growth rings, which is where the grain is. So what they'll do is the top layer wants to expand horizontally, let's say. It's all horizontally, but left and right. Then the layer underneath is going to want to expand and contract the long ways, and then they keep alternating them, and then it's glued together. And so what that does is create a tremendous amount of dimensional stability. So one of the advantages for engineered wood flooring is that you can do a much wider plank and longer length, and that floor is not going to move nearly as much, if at all, as the equivalent would be in solid. So engineered technologies come a long way. Originally, it was like a thin layer on top that, was used to just cut costs. And then they would put some kind of plywood underneath it and they would sell that. And then you could have a real wood floor. Now, though, a lot of engineered, depending on the thickness of that top layer, it can be refinished as many times as a solid because you can only go down to where the tongue and groove
like
is.
Like an eighth of an inch.
Yeah. And then so it can mitigate a lot of the advantages that solids have with a higher end engineered. So they're not always less expensive. In some cases, they can be actually quite a bit more expensive. Mm-hmm. Then the third one, and this is the one that got people really upset, is called composite engineered. And this technology is relatively new. And what that means is the top layer is still wood. It's a real piece of wood. So if it's white oak or maple or whatever, you have a real piece of maple. But underneath that is some sort of either wood byproduct like high density fiber or medium density fiber, or in some cases now they're using composite type cores like WPC, which is waterproof core, PVC.
Like a rubbery kind of.
Yeah, almost like what you would see in a vinyl, except that like a rigid core vinyl plank, except that instead of it being all the way vinyl, that top visual layer is still wood. Mm-hmm. And so that, has raised some controversy within the industry, but currently the definition is based on the visual. So when you look at a wood floor, the surface you're effectively walking on, that knot that you see in there or whatever it is, the grain, is that a real knot from a real tree or is that a picture of it or a recreation of it?
So as all things in our society now, we're adding an extra gender.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. So as with technology, I guess. So we are kind of trying to keep up with the times and make sure our definitions fit and that they're defendable. So a laminate, for example, is not considered real wood because a laminate floor is a picture of wood over a core, does some type of composite or fiber core backing.
And that's sort of what that sort of got this whole thing started about 25, 30 years ago, was the laminate flooring that you could buy at the big box store that was real inexpensive and people could go in and do it themselves, snap it together, put it on the floor. But by gosh, if it got wet, bye-bye.
Right. So laminate technology's improved. It can get a little wet now, but it's not, it's still, from a visual standpoint, it's the visual that you're seeing is not a real piece of wood. It's a picture of it. So that's the difference between everybody kind of lumps, not everybody, but there's a section of the population that lumps laminate in with engineered, and they are technically two very different things. So an engineered wood floor will still raise the value of your home the way a solid will at the same rate, which most realtors will say is anywhere between 5 to 10%.
So
of the value of the home.
when people are trying to make a selection on engineered flooring, one of the things that I tell all of them is hold that thing up, look at the edge of it, and look at the thickness of that top layer of wood. Is that the advice? Is that good advice?
It is good advice, but it doesn't always tell you everything you might think it's telling you. Like everything, this is actually fairly complex. So the thickness of that top layer determines only whether or not it can be refinished multiple times. So in some cases, yes, you're going to want something that can be refinished multiple times, but not always. Sometimes if something is that top layer is hand scraped or textured in a very specific way, it's going to wear better and last longer already. And you may want to just apply an additional coat of finish, or if it's an oil, just keep it oiled, because as it wears, it's going to improve the look and you're not really going to sand it. So you're basically in that situation, if you had a much thicker top layer, you're paying for a sports car with an engine that will go 3 times the legal speed limit. It's nice to know it can go that fast, but you're never going to drive it that fast.
Right.
So you're paying for something you don't actually need. One of the other disadvantages of that, just to keep in mind, sometimes with a wider plank, if you do something that is thicker than a 4mm top layer, like a 6mm or something, you think, wow, this is really good quality. But with that wider plank, that's more area for the wood to change with certain dramatic, climate changes.
Expand
and it
and
can
contract.
pull itself apart.
Sure. Yeah.
And we've seen that happen.
Yeah, I've seen that happen. And one of the big advantages to engineered flooring is the finish that you get on it. Let's talk a little bit about the finish. That I can't give you the quality of finish normally on a job site that you can get in a factory finished floor.
That's definitely true. And so that's just a matter of finish technologies. And so one of my last jobs, I actually sold flooring finish. So spent a lot of time understanding the chemistry of that and everything. And it was really interesting. But when you think about an on-site finish, you're only going to be able to apply about 3 coats. It has to be engineered in a way that it will dry and cure in most in-home conditions around the country. So you have to be able to, whether it's winter in Wisconsin or summer in Arizona, it has to be able to dry in most of those conditions. The other thing too is with the factory, you have ideal conditions. So you're controlling the climate, the humidity, and then you also have the ability to UV cure it. So factory finishes require special machinery to cure. It cures instantly under intense UV lights. It comes down this really long line. And then when it's done, you can put it in and it's fully cured. Whereas site finishes actually require, in some cases, an additional 7 to 30 days. So that floor will be dry, but it has to be cured.
Well,
so,
like anything liquid, even concrete, any finishes, paint, anything that we put on a surface liquid, it requires a certain amount of time to actually get hard. And just because you can touch it or walk on it on your socks doesn't mean it's cured.
Exactly. So the second you can have something that's dry and you can walk on it and you won't leave any footprints, but the second you start moving furniture, you're going to gouge it.
Right.
And so site finish in general, they just don't. It's not impossible, but it's very, very difficult to create something that's that strong, that still behaves in a way that you can apply it right. So there's always that balance. Whereas in a factory, it comes down that line. It's designed to perform. They don't have to worry about how do we apply it properly and open coat time and what is the humidity in the room. They have all that controlled. So they'll get 10 coats and they're cured immediately.
Sorry to interrupt you. One of the things that I really love about engineered flooring is your ability to have a lot more selection in the wood species. Down here, we were always oak. It was oak or pine. That's all we used for years. I don't know if it was that way all over the country, but it was here. And now with engineered flooring, we can get exotic woods and have our floors all kinds of stuff.
Oh yeah, yeah. You can get unfinished as well in different
Yes.
species.
Yeah.
There was a time in the '90s where Brazilian cherry cost less than oak, and that was due most. I mean, there were a number of factors, but predominantly it was due to improper forestry management in South America. So now that they put the kibosh on some of the things they were doing down there, the price kind of went back to where it should be. But there was a time where exotics were very popular in the
Hmm.
United States. The domestic species now are still more popular. They're a little more sustainably harvested, and you can get. It's just the look is what a lot of people are going for right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about something that I know that see a lot more than I do, but people just love wood. What is it about wood floors that make people feel great when they walk
Oh
in there?
man, I love that question, and I wish more people asked it. The so There's a number of theories behind this. Effectively, though, wood is the aspirational product. We have done the research at the National Wood Flooring Association, where we asked people if you had your dream home, budget aside, this is your home. You make it however you want it. What is your ideal flooring in there? And it was like 79% said wood, and tile was number two, I think, with like 13% or something
Hmm.
like that.
Hmm.
So that was what people wanted, wood. It's why vinyl looks like wood. It's why laminate looks like wood. I mean, if you're making vinyl, you can make vinyl look like whatever you want.
Right.
And they do. There is some vinyl that looks like tile. I don't want to say that doesn't exist. It absolutely does. But it's predominantly wood. And I think, and this is me, I've seen some studies on this, but this is more just me waxing philosophically. There is something to be said for a connection to nature and to natural products.
Exactly.
And there's
Hmm.
something about that provides a sense of peace,
It
sort
do,
of
it
subconsciously,
does. It
when you're
does.
surrounded by wood versus when you're surrounded by plastic.
Well, and the other thing is that even if you go in let's just say you go in a building, a commercial building, and it's got all these white, nice marble floors, but the first thing people say is it was pretty, but it's cold. You know, it doesn't have that feeling that of warmth that you get with wood floors. So I absolutely agree with that assessment.
Yeah, that I agree with that too. And I think with some of even the lookalike products, there's a sense of environmental responsibility that comes from wood. Our life cycle analysis, carbon sequestration analysis, all of that in wood is just beyond, nothing is even close to that as far as if you care environmentally, what you put in your home, from a safety aspect, all of that. It really makes a huge difference. And
Hmm.
in longevity, wood lasts a long time, even if you have something in there designed not to be refinished, it's going to look better as it ages, like genuine leather versus polyester.
Sure, sure. You
So
mean
it,
you
you know,
mean
I
wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. I like polyester.
polyester has its purposes. So and I'm not saying that leather, you should only wear leather in every situation where you otherwise would have worn poly, because I wouldn't recommend working out in a leather jacket. But there's a time and place for this. If you want polyester to look like,
I
you're going to
had
wear
some nice
polyester to a
suit. I
formal
had some
event.
nice suits in the '70s. They were all polyester and a nice big open collar. And I was a rocking dude.
And you kind of took them home to your shag carpet, and uh,
And I had long hair.
nice. Yeah, no, there is a time and place for all of that, and there is, wood is not the best material for every single situation,
Okay,
and
so one pet peeve I've got about engineered flooring is how people are installing them. And on my YouTube channel, I have several videos of one particular house where we pulled the engineered floor up that had been glued down, and I walked in the house and glued down to a slab. This is what I'm referring to, and the slab had a lot of moisture coming up through it, and I could actually see the effervescence coming up in the between the wood slats. And when we pulled it up, of course, there was a massive mold issue underneath it, where for years moisture had been coming up through there. And I have told people always, if you have the option, you should do a floating floor, not glue it to slab. I've had experiences where the wood will cup, it'll get damaged, brand new Brazilian the Brazilian rosewood or whatever that was one of the first ones I saw in a house many years ago, and it had just cupped. It wasn't 6 months after they put it down, and I've seen it repeatedly. So, what is your opinion about whether or not people should glue or float an engineered flooring?
So your experience is fair. The one you just described is common and does happen a lot. I will say this: usually we default to the NWFA or National Wood Flooring Association installation guidelines for these kinds of things because it is possible under certain conditions. So it's hard for me to say this will never work or this will always work. But the guidelines in there are pretty specific. If you are going to glue to a slab, there's certain moisture type of glue that's approved. You have the concrete has to be at a certain moisture level. All of that has to be tested. All of that has to be recorded because God forbid you do have a problem. You're going to have to be able to back up why you did it
Right.
and what it was like when you did that. I mean, concrete, it's a weird kind of substrate, right? Because it feels dry, but it can actually be wet forever, right? I think in the center of the Hoover Dam, the concrete is still wet.
Well,
So,
no, I mean, concrete takes 70 years to cure. It actually never cures. It actually always stays in technically a liquid form. But the problem is a concrete slab is just like a sponge. And if there's ground moisture underneath it, and it's not only the ground moisture underneath it. Now down here where we have forced air conditioning, we're introducing moisture into the air of our homes. And so that floor, regardless of what kind it is, whether it's engineered or solid wood floor, is getting bombarded on top in the little lines between the slats, the little reveals, and all of those things, and from underneath with moisture. So moisture coming out of the slab, moisture on top, and it does. Sometimes it just doesn't stand a chance.
no, it doesn't. And in those situations, I agree. I mean, I would not move to gluing it down to concrete immediately. Usually that is what's common in that case is you put a pad underneath that and then you can edge glue it as you float it. But it really is situational, and I would definitely consult the National Wood Flooring Association installation guidelines. But what you're talking about, though, in a broader sense, is always make sure you understand exactly what you're about to do
Right.
and why. Because
Right.
if you install it incorrectly, legally the onus is on the installer, not the manufacturer.
Well,
So the
and
manufacturer can only make product that will do a certain thing. They're not going to be able to come back and say, look, this was never approved to just be installed any way you felt like.
And the problem is that, of course, I wouldn't expect a homeowner to know the difference. They hire somebody, they put it in, and the only way that floor guy knows how to put it in is with glue. I keep experiencing this, and I lecture them, and I tell them, don't do it, and they do it anyway.
Yeah, well,
But
it's an expensive mistake, though.
it
If
is.
you
It
have
is.
a multi-thousand-dollar claim and an inspector comes out and looks at it and says, "Look, this was never approved for the installation of this method. Why did you do it this way?"
Exactly.
And the onus ends up being on the installer, and that's a tough pill to swallow. A lot of guys that I know installing. My father used to be an installer, so we know this. Like smaller solopreneurs, or maybe you got a couple guys working for you, they're not going to be able to shell out a 10, 20, $30,000 claim. That could really hurt them. So it's really important. The old phrase is what? Measure twice, cut once.
Right.
So, and that's true. Just make sure you know when you're installing something. And that's one of the things we offer when we work with our installation partners. If they've got a question on something, we work with them directly and say, look, this is what's recommended. This is what's not recommended. We'll help in any way we can, but we would love to get that call before it goes in, not
Yeah,
after.
right. Wow, John, I really appreciate you spending some time with us this morning. It's been really, really a pleasure, really informational. I really
Oh, well, thank
appreciate it
you.
so much.
The
We're gonna.
pleasure was mine.
I
Thank
think we
you.
ought to do this more often, and we'll keep covering more ground with it because there's really a lot more to talk about when we talk about wood floors. Thank you so much.
Great. Well, thank you. Anytime.
Okay. John Dupra with Revel Floors. We're going to take a quick break. The hardest working and arguably most important system in our homes is our air conditioning and heating system. It heats the air, it cools the air, and it filters the air. That's why it's so critical to have it checked and maintained by the very best professionals available. It's time to contact Total Air and Heat at totalair.com. Get that system pruned and tuned. If you want to have the very best experience, you've got to hire the very best company. Total Air's employees are honest, well-trained, and thoroughly background checked. I never have to worry about sending their technicians out to my clients' homes. Family owned and operated for 3 generations, Total Air and Heat has been a fixture in North Dallas for over 60 years. Total Air is a proud dealer of the Trane air conditioning systems, and you know how hard it is to stop a Trane, so give them a call at 972-881-0020. That's 972-881-0020, or contact them at totalair.com today. So I had a conversation with a friend of mine last night. She called me, and she had actually made it through this tornado we had a couple of weeks ago here in Dallas. And she said to me, I just saw the front of my house for the first time. And I was like, what does that mean? And she goes, she said, I never knew what it looked like because it was covered with trees, and now there's no more trees. And so she's like, well, it's ugly. And so, this is part of what people are having to deal with through these tornadoes. Now, in California, of course, they're having the wildfires, and I know it's even worse, really. I mean, I don't know if there's any best or worse. If you lose your home, you lose your home. You lose all your landscaping. So when you're going through these storms and you're going through, you've survived a tornado, or you survived these brush fires or hurricane or whatever it is. I've even, like I said last week, I've worked in a lot of homes that were flooded, because I lived in an area that when we had real heavy rain, it would actually get up, the water would get up from this particular creek and flood houses. And my wife and I would go down and help people get mud out of their houses and get things straightened up. And so it was I thought this was a very interesting conversation that I had with my friend, because I had never really thought of it in terms of, I never have actually seen the front of my house because it's covered with these big, beautiful trees. And one of the things, I'm in the neighborhood doing work, and where this tornado was. And one of the things that you noticed right off the top is that the big, beautiful, mature trees are, for a large part of them, are gone. And even basically above the rooftops, you see a bunch of leafless trees. You just see sort of the bulk of the tree with no leaves or small limbs on it. It's not very pretty. And it was interesting. I had a discussion with a builder that was right behind this person's house that I'm looking at. And he has just built a brand new house. So they went in, they bought a house, an old house, they tore it down, but it had these big, mature, beautiful trees on the lot. And that actually adds a lot of value to that lot as well. So then they go in and they build this they build this house, and the house is, it's a spec house, so it's part of the value is the trees. So when he and I were talking, it was really interesting, because he said, I don't know what's going to happen now. I've got this big investment. I have this house. It's a spec house. But a lot of what we based the value on was that it had these big, beautiful trees, and it was gonna sell for a certain price. And so we don't really know what to do. So when you're dealing with these storms and the aftermath of these storms, that's part of it. It's not just your house. It's your landscaping. It's the big trees. It's your swimming pool. The house I'm looking at, first thing we're gonna have to do is fix a big fence that got literally blown over by the force of the wind. Nothing hit it. It just got blown over. And and so when all that starts growing legs, so when you're going through to fix your house after these tornadoes, you'll find that there's all kinds of weird little things that happen. The house that I'm looking at up there, the tile blew off the wall of the kitchen and landed on the granite countertops and chipped it. And so now they have to replace the granite countertops, as you really can't repair that. And so you have to look at these little things. So when you're visiting with your insurance company, when they're out there looking at things, you want to make sure and go through in detail all these little things and see if you make sure you cover it all. If you had things blow down, see if it damaged anything below it. If you have, for instance, this house, the insurance company told the homeowner they were going to pay for all new cabinets in the kitchen. And I didn't understand why, because they didn't look that bad. Well, the insurance company said there's enough of them that has to be repaired. And we know we can't match them because they were custom cabinets. So you're just going to have to put all new cabinets in. Of course, the homeowner's kind of happy about that. I don't blame them. But these are things that when you're dealing with the aftermath of these storms, you're dealing with insurance companies. I don't know that they cover the landscaping costs for these big trees that were lost and the value that's placing or taking away from the lot. I don't know if they do that. Maybe some do, maybe some don't. But they're not in the business of helping you value your house. They're in the business of getting it back where it was before. And they don't like to do upgrades, and they won't pay for upgrades. We're about to join David VanWert. David is in LA, and he is a specialist in residential technologies. And residential technologies, particularly in California, is changing rapidly because of all of the new codes that the state's forcing on the builders and the homeowners, such as every house has to have a solar panel and all that kind of stuff. So joining us now is David VanWert with VanWert Technologies. Hey, David, how you doing, man?
Morning. How are you?
How are you?
I'm fantastic. Can't complain. It's a bit windy here in LA, but can't complain for almost November. So well, great weather. So.
That's good. That's good. It's good to see you, buddy.
You too.
Yeah. So we, one of the things that you and I talked about the other day is how all these new laws that or codes, I guess, in California with the solar panels and that, how is that affecting the technologies or what people are having to do in their homes to adjust to all this?
I think they're really just becoming a bit more stringent with it all. When it was, a few years ago, it was a nice to have. And when it comes to solar or LED lighting and LED fixtures and control, it was kind of a nice to have. And now California is implementing it. It'd be a must. As you alluded to, California recently said that all new homes must have solar on them, especially, and when it comes to the high-end residential new construction, most homeowners weren't doing it. I would say a vast majority of our clientele in the LA market just don't have the need for solar panels. Don't really care to go through the expense and the trouble and trying to find real estate for them and have these big ugly things sitting on their roof, and now the state is forcing them to have it.
Well, I'll tell you what, the way the local power companies having to do these rolling blackouts, I bet there's a bunch of them that wish they did have those solar panels on their roofs.
Yeah, I'm seeing that more often, not necessarily just the solar panels, but generators and battery backups and getting yourself off the grid, if you will. I'm starting to see that more often, especially, out here in LA, the winds are crazy today. It's, upwards of 80 mile per hour winds. Which
really?
We don't see that very often. So I'm surprised if I go black, you'll know why.
Yeah, well, that was one of the things I was going to warn our audience that if we lose Dave, it's right. But it'll have to do with the rolling blackouts.
I'll tell you what. So yeah, no, that all of that is affecting things, and I think solar coming, more and more prevalent, and like you said, now a requirement, along with battery backups and things that Tesla are doing, to where you can completely augment, yourself being on, an Edison in our case, or a PG&E, and not only have that emergency backup, but then also potentially at nighttime augment your electricity use. So it's pretty exciting.
Well, you think that with the advent, or I don't know if that's a proper term, but with all the low voltage technology we're using now, that LED lighting and different things in the home, are we going to be at a point where we can have sort of a low voltage home?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're getting there quick. I mean, with LED in particular, LED is almost all. Well, it really is. It's 100% low voltage for the most part, for a majority of fixtures, especially on the new construction side. And you're starting to see some really cool things from other companies. One like Savant, for instance, that can actually, through low voltage and by replacing a traditional circuit breaker, actually monitor what's happening down to a breaker level. So you can actually see, the amount of power draw. You can set scheduling to turn off certain loads, during certain times of the day, to really help, offset a lot of that electricity usage, which is pretty neat. And just from a homeowner standpoint, just being able to see into that, you get these statements from your electrical company at the end of the month, and you don't know what any of that means, and you say, okay, great, I'm using a lot of power, how do I change that? And that's where batteries and being able to see things at a breaker level are definitely giving homeowners a lot more power.
Well, and we're also, I say we, developers are developing more energy efficient appliances, televisions, all the things that we use electronically.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And in our business as well, it's monitoring those things and keeping that in mind. Clients definitely like the flexibility of what LED is giving you nowadays, as well as the benefit of the energy savings is a big part of it as well. So those two things coupled together, with high efficiency appliances, LED lighting, and now solar being mandatory. I mean, you're definitely seeing your energy consumption go way down.
Well, sure, and it makes your life better because it makes it cleaner. It makes it cleaner to exist all the way
Sure.
around. And so I was wanting to ask you how the storage systems for the solar, has that improved to the point where it makes it more affordable and a lot more efficient to use solar?
Yeah, I mean, so you do have certain companies. I mean, I would think, in terms of what's in the news, and homeowners are probably aware of. Tesla is probably the biggest one, and they're still relatively expensive. I believe the payback period on them is roughly 7 to 10 years, I believe. So they're definitely still an investment. But if you couple that along with the other benefits of being able to be completely off the grid at night, and then also you get these crazy windstorms. You probably see this tree blowing.
Right.
If you do, if and when you do lose power, you at least have some peace of mind that you can still keep running for a period of time. And I think especially here in LA, now that the electrical companies have passed this rule, that my phone blows up on a daily basis from phone calls from Edison. We have a rental property up north in Mammoth Lakes that is dramatically affected by it, and we get calls 3-4 times a day saying, hey, just be on the lookout, we might turn off your power.
Oh, so they're warning you. They're not just cutting you off.
They're at least giving you a heads up, but they're not telling you when.
Uh-huh.
And it just kind of happens instantly. Especially it hasn't really happened here in LA to us, anyways, or many of my clients that they've mentioned. But like I said, up in Mammoth Lakes in our rental property, the whole town shuts off.
Oh man.
Yeah,
Oh.
businesses and homeowners and everything else aren't prepared for it. And so literally being a small little mountain town in California, it goes black. No one has generators. No one
Just
has
like the
batteries.
good old days, man. Just like
Absolutely.
the
Right.
gold rush.
Right. Exactly.
Well, what's new in technologies that you're dealing with these days? What are you trying to introduce to your clients?
I mean, you're seeing a lot more of these things get better and better, from an energy standpoint and lighting and that type of thing. As I mentioned, Savant doing the, being able to monitor things down to a breaker level is really cool.
Yeah.
Technology that you're doing. Lutron, which is kind of the leader in lighting control systems, especially for new construction properties. Has some really neat stuff that they're doing with LED nowadays that you can actually, dim and control individual fixtures in a space, which is pretty neat. One thing that
So you don't have to do just the whole room.
Exactly.
Wow, that's complex.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. And you mentioned low voltage in terms of lighting. That's how that system works. They all daisy chain together via low voltage wiring, and you could, the typical process, say in a family room per se, you have 6 to 10 can lights in your ceiling, and they all turn off at once and turn on at once. And if you have a dimming system, they all dim at once. But what if you have a nice piece of art, like you have behind me, that you want to keep those highlighted and lit, but you want to be able to dim everything else? Typically you don't have that luxury unless it's wired that way.
I have to say, I have been enjoying that jam box you have behind you. That it's a picture of an antique. That's very cool.
Absolutely. Old school once in a while, at least in thought. So.
Well, it seems like the really huge changes in the technology that we've been focused on is the lighting. And I guess when you have these particularly large houses that have just buku lights in them, that makes sense, because that's other than air conditioning is probably where you spend most of your money in electrical in a house.
Absolutely. Yeah. Lighting fixture packages, because I'm sure, as you know, can get extremely expensive very quick. And it gives, especially if you're remodeling or building a home from scratch, you want to have that flexibility. It's nice to be able to give homeowners and say, hey, we can give you the ability to adjust each one of these lights if your furniture moves around or your tastes change, or you get a new piece of art that you want to highlight, and be able to give just homeowners that flexibility and have it be more cost effective and easier to use and everything else.
So what is your opinion of the wireless technology in lighting? I still see some of it. We used to have Radio Raw, which was a kind of a early, technology in that, and it kind of had some detractors. Some people liked it, some people didn't. How is wireless lighting, that technology, going?
It can be very good. You mentioned Radio Raw, which is, by Lutron. They have their version 2 now, which is, it's called Raw 2. Kept it simple, but it works really, really well. It's hands down been very, very solid. And then lots of other companies make solutions as well. Crestron is one, Control 4. They all kind of have their own flavor of wireless lighting that for retrofits and remodels works really, really well.
Yes.
It's very solid. For new construction, probably not the best solution. But then now what you're starting to see is their, so these companies that always pitch, Radio Raw or similar as kind of a mid-market for your, call it a 3,000 to 5,000 square foot home. They now have kind of delved into more of the DIY class as well, that you could drive down to Lowe's or Home Depot and pick up, what is called their Caseta line, that is meant for smaller applications even. So if you want to do just one room, say you want to do your media room, your family room, and you want to be able to control the lights in there, or your master bedroom, you can easily just swap the dimmers and you download the app.
Well, that's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of it. And I actually did a house where you put the dimmer for the wireless on the wall. You're not connecting it to a wire.
Yep.
That's the beautiful part about it. So you could, in theory, go in any room and do any type of lighting that you really feel you need or want, and not have to tear everything apart.
Exactly. Yeah, it's great. You want to add, a couple of lamps like you see behind me. They make modules that literally just plug in line with them. You add it to your Wi-Fi network, and now you can control that lamp and dim it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So it's pretty cool. So you've got that, and then now couple that with voice control, which is definitely
that's coming on. Yeah.
And all of your major manufacturers are doing it. Obviously it's a big push for Google and Alexa, and there's some more boutique companies like Josh AI that are doing this type of control that make all of this very, very functional and very easy to use. My 4-year-old knows how to not turn the lights on and off, for better or for worse, and videos on YouTube and all of that. So it's a pretty
well, and it's transitioned also to kind of running the whole house in different ways. And I think that what we need to do, actually focus a show on that on our next show. I think voice activation is huge. And
marketplace.
And I think maybe next time we do that. And I really appreciate you taking time out to be with us this morning. It's been great visiting, great information as always.
Pleasure. Anytime. Happy to be here. I appreciate that.
I'm glad I didn't see any trees blowing by your window. Just one blowing.
This one over here.
Thank you so much, David VanWert with VanWert Technologies in Los Angeles, California. We're so glad to have him here with us today. Folks, if you need a contractor, if you're looking for a remodel or a new house, or if you're looking to maybe just do some upgrades or seasonal upgrades, or you just need some advice on a project that you're thinking about doing, give me a call, Alex Guthrie, 469-446-8508, or contact me, alex@remodelrev.com or alex@alexguthrie.net, either one, and I'll be happy to respond to you and give you all the help I can give you. It's been a great show today. I want to thank Ziggy Becker, who put up with me today with all these challenges I threw his direction, and David VanWert with VanWert Technology Design in Los Angeles, California, and John Dupra with Revel Woods, in New York. And until next week, this is Alex Guthrie signing off. Have a great week. Sometimes it's a question of, do I call or don't I call the foundation repair company? Well, what if I tell you that I know a foundation repair company that will tell you if you don't need foundation repair? That's right. Hargrave & Hargrave Foundation Repair has been in business for over 50 years, and they know the difference. One of the last family-owned foundation repair businesses in North Texas. Not only are they honest, they know what causes your foundation to move, and they know how to fix it. Don't be duped by fly-by-night foundation companies that provide shortcuts and messy fixes. Call Hargrave & Hargrave Foundation Repair at 972-442-3415 at the first sign of trouble. Hargrave uses the Chance helical pier system exclusively because it's the highest quality, most reliable helical pier money can buy. 972-442-3415 or contact them at hargravefoundation.com.
You can catch Remodel Revolution anytime. Follow the show on the website, remodelrevolutionradio.com, or on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest, using the handle @Remodel Revolution Radio. You can always listen to the show on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and TuneIn, and watch the show anytime on YouTube.